So, the next ones are from Maastricht University and Atos. The stage is yours. Okie dokie. So, welcome.
Thank you. We also have some slides.
Slides too?
Yes.
It's on the top. Wait 2 seconds.
I'm gonna find it.
Close it.
Oh.
Yes.
Please. That's fine.
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, so first of all, welcome everyone and thank you. We are truly honored to be here. Thank you for the invitation. We are a premium project team and we are currently working with Atos. Does not work. Okay. Yeah, let me first introduce ourselves. So we are master students at Maastricht University, and we all have different backgrounds. We all study at different faculties. And as I mentioned, we are currently working on a project with Atos. And at the very beginning of our project in January, we asked ourselves, why is digital sovereignty so important? So we conducted some industry expert interviews. And at the early beginning, we realized that there's no common ground we could focus on. So there's a really low majority of the topic. And we thought that it's definitely needed for action right now. And we found out that there's no harmonized approach and no harmonized definition, no terminology across industries, and that's a massive problem here. There's definitely a different understanding of the topic across the industry experts we conducted interviews with. And moreover, there's no legal definition we can rely on, as we already mentioned a couple of times today. And therefore, for companies, it's also quite hard to promote and to communicate the topic of digital sovereignty because they cannot rely on a common ground, as I mentioned. And also to raise awareness is quite hard because there's no unified terminology so far.
And we have 2 more prominent problems. For example, one we heard a lot of about it today. For example, the high reliance on US and Chinese hyperscalers. So not only from a political perspective, but also from a corporate perspective. And the members of Gaia X are also very dependent from the services of the hyperscalers. And maybe we think we need more investments into the digital infrastructure. It was also mentioned today. So there are almost no binding laws and regulations related to digital sovereignty, but there are few exceptions, for example, in the telecommunications sector and in the banking sector. And we want to have true commitments, such as binding laws for Gaia X members. And we think Gaia X is the already needed foundation. We need to put the ideas into action, like Mr. Hoffman already said today, and also Mr. Tadieu. And all right, we need more. We need a more risk-taking approach to encourage innovation, and without infringing the EU values. So data protection and data appreciation is not mutually exclusive. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, thanks very much. Maybe I kick it off then. It's a question that I already pondered during the first presentation that we've had today. When we talk about data protection, there seems to be the legal side of that, but then there's also a cultural side to that in both directions, right? One is sometimes we don't care, but we pretend to really care. We know about privacy paradoxa, that kind of things. And then there's also a tendency that I'm observing all the time. You talk to people, let's do something new, and the first response, without understanding what this all is about, is, no, data protection. So it seems to be some kind of fig leaf for everything. And I was wondering how you position yourselves in that field of tension in between data protection as a legal necessity, but also as a cultural phenomenon. And in fact, there's different levels, right? One is what people seemingly want. One is what is written down in laws and fundamental laws and different things. And how do you navigate that? And what kind of data protection are you referring to? So I think we need a different culture of data protection. We don't need different legal frameworks for data protection.
Yes, I think first one, to address your first part of the question, how do we position ourselves in this tension? So in my own opinion is that social involvement and social development, this culture development is a leading point, is a starting point for the definition in legal part. So that is when the legal part intervene. And the legal definition is based on social development. So I don't think there are two contradicting parts, but where we can say there's a paradox in a social and legal part is people say they care, but when in actions, they might not that care for some small benefits. And that is the part we need to raise the legal awareness to, again, back to educating the society and the public.
Yeah, actually, like putting it maybe more into action, like when we also talk from a company perspective, we are like helping Atos to maybe like design the communication strategy. And right now we see a lot of approaches that focuses on lowering risks. So the whole data sovereignty debate is really on, okay, how to not lose, how to save data. So it's all focused on the negative instead of really focusing on the positive side of it. And that is like a mentality thing. So what they could do is really like emotionally and also in how they communicate, really trigger the positive side of it instead of like just making sure you don't have to be afraid anymore. Also when talking to potential clients and selling the solutions.
And to anticipate my dear neighbor's question then, how are you going to do that? What's your next steps?
Yeah, maybe also like when you offer the services, design it in a way that it's not right, again, like reactive, but really proactive and preventing instead of just saying, yeah, we want to make it better.
Yeah, it's, as in the GDPR, we always say privacy by design and privacy by default is the starting point.
And you mentioned in your pitch also, sorry,
No, please.
several times about GaiaX. My question is, again, we are fragmented in Europe. It, of course, makes sense to have a joint combined strategy, for sure. But when we try to do it, it takes really forever. Having to, set a framework that's acceptable to everybody and that is representing everybody's needs. Do you have any thoughts on how we can go quicker? Because this is also, we are already in the catch-up game and we complicate it even further. So do you have any thoughts on that?
I think as a starting point, and again referring back to many times we talk about today, is harmonized definition about what is digital sovereignty. Because now in different industries and in different companies, we found different terminologies. For example, some industries are only referring to data protection, some industries are referring to cloud sovereignty. And in one of our expert interview from a cybersecurity expert, he mentioned that a cloud will not be sovereign. What it will be sovereign is the data itself. And in some industries, we also have different terminologies as cybersecurity. So I think a combined, a harmonized definition is the starting point. And instead of going deep into policies or binding laws, we can first ask for binding commitment. So all the participants, all the members of GaiaX should at least offering something.
Yeah, also just as an action for Atos, for example, or other like industry leaders, it would be to be a first mover and actually like do some risk-taking approaches. So that's necessary in our opinion, because otherwise we're not moving forward.
Did you have in your team discussions about how digital sovereignty should be defined, and what is your conclusion? So what is your definition of digital sovereignty?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we had the expert interviews, for example, in order to get an idea how to really define it. Also, we looked at several articles and tried to define it, and we thought that I think it was also in the first pitch, if I remember correctly, that it was mentioned about technological sovereignty is one part, data sovereignty is the other part, and this all together is then digital sovereignty. And there are so many services related to digital sovereignty, and it's quite hard to have like a term for it. But I think that's a starting point, and we have to really try to make it more mature, because especially in the corporate world, we thought it's not very mature, because also companies weren't really posting about it, because they thought, okay, we still have no 100% correct idea about this topic, and therefore we must be careful.
Yes, and again, back to the point of how to come up with a definition. I think it's mainly from three perspectives. The first one is from technology perspective, what is sovereignty? And second point is from the data perspective, what is data sovereignty? And lastly is judicial aspect, from the jurisdictional perspective, what is sovereignty?
I think that's a wonderful point of the discussion, but it's also maybe time to step a little bit back from the very specific and applied, so sorry, I'm reversing my role now, and to think about who should define that actually. I mean, is it companies? Is it their task to define that? And then maybe also, could you think about a definition that is less phenomenological, that sticks to different technologies or things we see, but more gives us an idea of the gist that can then also be maybe used in different contexts? Because I could imagine that there is a value that companies define it a little bit different because they see different contexts. So what would be a step to come up with a more general definition that actually works and helps companies to apply it to their cases and to talk to each other, but they have a general concept?
Yeah. First of all, it needs to be a concept that everyone identifies with, which is a bit difficult because we saw different levels of maturity throughout Europe. But then we thought about having like this general state of independence and like giving back the power and also long-term competitive advantage of Europe, because that's something everyone wants. So really like having the common goal, common mission, common vision, instead of just like a clear definition of a term. So really like attaching this more emotional and social side of it, because that's what also later customers want.
Yes, I think the value is actually lying on the stage that everyone sit together and comes up with a definition. The process of this discussion is the value itself, because in this process we have to get on the same stage, I would say mutual recognition of each other's approach.
But again, who sits at the table? I mean, is it customers and companies? Or, I mean, we're talking about a foundational value. Have you considered maybe other stakeholders?
I think customers and companies and also lawmakers, legislators.
Okay. But also other stakeholders. So we also talked about, because of the whole sustainability debate around it, so we really need to also include like NGOs and also like change-making parties if we want to have the sustainability aspect included. So it should not only be Gaia X members, but also really like different parties.
Sorry for nudging you, but I think that's an important insight. Yeah, you're talking about a big topic, and it's good to have many people at the table.
So
you mentioned.
Sorry, if I can directly react there. What I've realized that also different disciplines take different perspectives at definitions. I'm an engineer, we tend to start with the definition. Other disciplines tend to end with the definition. Choose your weapons, right? Sorry, go ahead.
No, I like that remark. You mentioned one of the goals of Gaia X to kind of strengthen the European position in terms of competition from the East and the West. You know, you talked of reducing dependency from American and Chinese hyperscalers. So what would interest me is, what do you see as the European unique strength that we have? What makes us different? What could be our, in terms of, you know, founders speak, our USP? I've heard some discussion around especially our legal framework that is derived from values. That could be one point. I'd like to hear your point of view on it.
The unique of EU is this very unique human-centered approach, I would say. We have this very solid foundation of fundamental human rights, which including the right to privacy. And now since 2016, we have GDPR. I think that is a very solid starting point for building up any other further development. And the question now is how we balance the EU value on one hand, and another hand, as we mentioned also by my colleague and in this panel, the risk-taking approach to boost innovation.
Maybe also something like, if we say in unity lies power, then we also really need to be a unit. And I think that's the current problem. So that there's still like a lot of competition, and even though there is Europe, there's no true cooperation. So if we want to be a unified, or like construct unified digital sovereignty, we really need to act together. And also like, for example, knowledge sharing is a huge topic. And then also accessibility of these topics. So even for us, like our research took quite long to even like for us get a basic understanding of the maturity of different countries, and that has something to say.
Thank you.
So, I like that united we stand at the end. Thank you very much. That was digital sovereignty seen by Maastricht University. Thank you very much.